Blind date on Christmas Eve. The poor single mom arrived late, but the CEO waited anyway. It was Christmas Eve, and a soft hush had settled over the city. Snow fell in delicate spirals outside the wide glass windows of a small, warmly lit restaurant nestled between towering buildings. Inside, the atmosphere glowed, a golden haze from string lights and candles, jazz humming gently beneath the chatter of couples seated around festively decorated tables. A small wooden sign near the entrance read, "Blind date for the holidays, one night, one chance, no names." Elliot sat at a corner table by the window, posture relaxed but still. He wore a charcoal wool coat over a tailored suit, and his hands, calm, well-kept, rested beside a mug of hot chocolate. He had not touched it. His gray eyes flicked occasionally toward the door, then back to the snow-covered sidewalk. He did not fidget. He did not check his phone. He simply waited. To the staff, he was just another guest, quiet, solitary, polite. None of them recognized him as the CEO of Fairmont and Hayes, a global firm known for keeping its founder out of the press. He liked it that way. It had been 3 years since he had lost his wife, and even longer since he had voluntarily stepped into a room expecting anything more than silence. He had not planned to come tonight. The idea of a blind date had felt absurd, like dressing up grief in a party hat. But his longtime assistant, Marianne, had slipped the event flyer onto his desk weeks ago, with only a line scrawled beneath it. "You once said you wanted a quiet Christmas. Maybe start by sitting across from someone kind." For some reason, he had kept the flyer. And tonight, at the exact time listed, he arrived. Now, nearly 40 minutes had passed since his reservation time. The candle on his table had burned low. The once steaming chocolate had cooled. Conversations floated around him, warm laughter, clinking cutlery, but Elliot remained untouched by it all. Still, he waited. 10 minutes. 20. 35. The servers began to notice. One whispered to another, "He's still waiting?" A hostess peeked from behind the podium, brows furrowed. No one had come to sit across from him. There had been no calls, no messages, just silence. "Maybe she bailed," someone said quietly near the bar. Still, Elliot did not move. He looked out the window at the snow, his expression unreadable, but not bitter, not impatient. If anything, he looked quietly certain, as though some part of him believed that if he simply waited long enough, the evening might still shift. When a young server hesitated by his table to ask if he wanted to reschedule, Elliot glanced up, offered a faint, genuine smile, and said, "I think she will arrive." The server blinked, caught off guard by his composure, and stepped back without another word. The words hung gently in the air, unassuming, without drama. But in a room filled with people searching for connection, the quiet faith in his voice settled like snow, soft, unexpected, and deeply felt. The restaurant door opened with a rush of cold air. Snowflakes swirled briefly into the room before the door swung shut behind a woman, breathless and wide-eyed, her blonde hair damp with melted snow. In her arms, cradled close against her shoulder, a small boy slept, flushed and still. "Lena." She stood there for a moment, scanning the room. Her cheeks were pink from the cold and maybe from nerves. Her coat was too thin for the snow outside, and the fabric clung to her in places where the wind had bitten through. But it was clean, carefully buttoned, respectful. Then her eyes landed on him. Elliot rose quietly from the table in the corner where the candle still burned, the only one in the room untouched by food or laughter. He did not look surprised, not even relieved, just calm, steady. "I am so sorry," Lena said, her voice low, nearly swallowed by the soft jazz in the background. "My son had a fever. I couldn't leave him alone. I wasn't even sure I should still come, but..." She looked down, then took a step back toward the door. "If this is too strange, I can just..." "I figured there would be a reason," Elliot said gently, "and I'm not in a hurry." He crossed the space between them and gently gestured to the chair across from his own. "Please, sit." Lena hesitated, adjusting Noah in her arms. The boy stirred slightly, but did not wake. Carefully, she lowered herself into the seat, keeping Noah's weight balanced against her shoulder. Her movements were practiced, efficient, tender. Elliot signaled for a server and asked for warm water and an extra blanket. Then, he removed his coat, shaking off the snowflakes, and draped it over the back of her chair. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Lena exhaled slowly, brushing damp hair away from her face. "I almost didn't come," she admitted. "But my friend, she gave me this ticket, said I should believe in something good, even if it's only for one night." Elliot listened, not with that polite, distracted air of someone just waiting for their turn to speak, but really listened. "I didn't dress for a date," she added, glancing down at her jeans and worn boots. "I didn't even have time to put on lipstick." "That's all right," Elliot said, his voice even. "Neither did I." Lena blinked, then laughed, softly, a small, tired sound, but real. Noah stirred again, his small body coughing lightly in her arms. Without a word, Elliot reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a neatly folded tissue. With it came something unexpected, a tiny stuffed bear, barely the size of his palm. "I wasn't sure who I'd be meeting tonight," he said, handing both to her. "But I brought this, just in case." Lena stared at the bear for a moment, visibly caught off guard. "You thought there might be a kid?" "I thought maybe someone would bring part of their world with them." She did not know what to say. No one had ever said something like that to her, not without judgment or expectation. Most men would have turned and walked out when they saw the child, or at least frowned. But Elliot simply sat there, quiet and unbothered. She reached out and took the bear. Noah, half asleep, curled slightly around it. "I did not mean to make this weird," she murmured. "You didn't," he said simply. Another pause. The candle flickered between them. "I don't have anything impressive to say," Lena continued, looking directly at him now. "No exciting career, no vacation stories, just diapers, part-time shifts, and a 4-year-old who hates green peas." "Sounds pretty real to me," Elliot replied. And something in his voice, something quiet and honest, unraveled a thread in her chest she didn't know she had been holding so tightly. She had expected awkward silence, judgment, maybe pity. But instead, she found warmth. Not grand, not dramatic, just present. Watching her carefully tuck the blanket around her son's legs, Elliot felt something unfamiliar stir in him. She was not polished or poised. She was exhausted and late. But she had come. She had shown up, even with every reason not to. "She does not try to impress me," he thought, "and that is exactly why I am impressed." And for the first time in years, as he looked across the table at someone he had never expected, Elliot realized something. He did not feel alone. The waiter approached their table, asking gently if they would like to order. Lena looked down at Noah, still curled against her chest, his breathing soft but steady, the little bear now clutched tightly in one hand. "Something simple," she said quietly. "Maybe soup?" Elliot nodded. "The house soup for both of us. And hot chocolate?" She smiled, grateful. "Yes, he loves it." As the waiter walked away, Lena adjusted the blanket wrapped around her son and folded her own coat behind his head as a makeshift pillow. Every movement was gentle, deliberate, practiced. She wiped his mouth lightly with a napkin, then tucked his hair behind his ear. Her eyes never left him, even as she spoke. "He gets night fevers," she said softly, "especially in the winter. I've gotten used to catching sleep in pieces." Elliot watched without saying anything, the flicker of the candle catching the side of his face, highlighting the stillness in his eyes. It was not pity. It was something deeper. Respect, maybe. Lena continued, her voice steady. I work at a retail store during the day and deliver food in the evenings. I try to make rent without falling behind on his medication. She smiled faintly. I used to draw, wanted to be an interior designer once. Now, I draw cartoons on his lunchboxes. He said nothing, just listened. I lost my mom 3 years ago, on Christmas Eve, she added after a pause. It was sudden. She was my only help with Noah back then. Elliot's fingers stilled around his cup. His eyes lifted to hers. My husband died in a car accident before Noah turned 2. I remember sitting in this same season, same weather, wondering if I would ever breathe normally again. The words hung between them, tender and raw, not rehearsed for sympathy but shared because she had stopped holding them in. I used to hate Christmas, Lena said, barely a whisper now. But this year, I did not want my son to grow up fearing the same day I couldn't forgive. Still, Elliot said nothing. But when Lena fell silent, gently brushing Noah's cheek with the back of her hand, Elliot finally spoke. My wife passed on Christmas morning, 4 years ago, he said, voice low but steady. She had been sick for a long time. I knew it was coming, but nothing really prepares you. Lena looked at him, startled, eyes wide with quiet understanding. I have not opened up to anyone since then, he continued. Not because I didn't want to feel again, but because I thought feeling would betray her memory. His eyes didn't waver. But tonight, a simple dinner reminded me that love doesn't return through perfection, it comes through honesty. Lena's lips trembled slightly. Her eyes filled, but she blinked quickly. I did not bring anything with me tonight, she murmured. No fancy dress, no clever stories, just the truth. That is more than enough, Elliot said. Their food arrived, and they ate in silence for a while. Noah stirred now and then drifted off again. Outside, snow began falling heavier, frosting the windows in a quiet hush. After they finished, Lena reached into her bag and began to open her wallet. Let me at least pay for my part. Elliot gently placed his hand over hers and shook his head. Please, let me pay. Not for the food, but for a night I'll remember. Not because of what was served, but because you stayed. She froze for a moment, her mouth parted, but no words came. No one had ever told her that staying mattered, not in the everyday chaos of her life, not when she was late, tired, or overwhelmed. And yet here he was, telling her that her presence, late and imperfect, was something valuable. Her voice caught as she said, "Thank you." Noah shifted and blinked sleepily. He looked at Elliot with heavy eyes, still half dreaming. "Are you Mommy's friend?" he asked in a tiny voice. "You smile nicer than Santa." Lena gasped, a flush rushing to her cheeks. Elliot laughed, not loudly but fully, a sound of something healing. "I suppose that means I need a red hat," he teased. Lena smiled, trying not to tear up. The three of them sat quietly as the music played on and snow fell steadily outside. In that little circle of flickering candlelight, they were not a perfect family, but something was beginning, something real. Not out of pity, or rescue, or grand gestures, but trust. And maybe that was enough. A week had passed since that unexpected Christmas Eve dinner, but Lena found herself thinking about it more often than she wanted to admit. Then, one Saturday morning, as she walked with Noah to the small community center near their apartment for a winter coat giveaway, she froze mid-step. There, in the middle of the hall, standing on a ladder, adjusting strings of lights above a row of folding tables, was Elliot. He wore a dark sweater, sleeves rolled, and his hair looked slightly wind-tossed from the cold. There was no suit, no driver waiting by the curb, just him, laughing with 2 teenage volunteers as they tangled themselves in a mess of tinsel. Lena blinked. "Mommy," Noah tugged on her hand. "That's Santa's friend." Before she could stop him, Noah ran across the room and threw his arms around Elliot's leg. Elliot startled, then looked down and beamed. "Well, if it isn't my favorite cookie critic." Noah grinned. You never finished my gingerbread. Elliot knelt to Noah's level. I have been looking for that piece everywhere. Lena approached, trying to seem composed. This is unexpected. He straightened, dusting glitter off his hands. Is it? I help out here when I can. They needed volunteers for the holiday event. Lena raised an eyebrow. You live 30 minutes from here. I told you, he said with a smile. I had business in the neighborhood. They stared at each other a beat too long, then were interrupted by a woman calling for help lifting a box of toys. Elliot excused himself and disappeared into the back. Lena sat on a folding chair beside Noah, watching Elliot move through the room, effortlessly charming children and quietly organizing behind the scenes. It unsettled her how natural he seemed here, how different from the distant, unreachable CEO she had imagined when she first learned his last name. The next morning, Lena returned home from a late shift to find a sealed envelope tucked under her apartment door. She opened it, and her heart stopped. It was her mother's hospital bill, paid, in full. There was no signature, no note, just a simple card inside that read, "Sometimes, kindness does not need credit, just hope that it reaches the right place." Her breath caught, her chest tightened. She knew who had done this. Her emotions churned, relief, embarrassment, then anger. Was this pity? Did he think she could not handle her life? She stayed up all night, pacing. By morning, she had decided she would confront him. She called the number he had once scribbled on a napkin. He picked up on the second ring. "Lena," he said, voice soft, "I was hoping you'd call. Did you pay my mother's bill?" There was a pause. Then, "Yes. I did not ask you to." "I know. Do you think I cannot manage my own life?" "I do not think that," he said, and his voice was steady. "I think you have managed too much, for too long, alone." She did not answer. "I do not see you as someone weak," Elliot continued. "I see someone who holds up a whole world without ever asking for help. And I wanted to stand behind you for once. Not in front, not to rescue, just behind." The silence between them stretched, then cracked. Lena's voice broke. "No one's ever said that to me. I meant it." That was when the tears came, not out of despair, but release. She wiped them quickly, but they would not stop. And in that quiet moment, something shifted. She still did not say thank you, but she did not tell him to stay away. And that was the first time in a long while she did not feel alone. It happened on an ordinary afternoon. Lena was standing in the aisle of a quiet, narrow bookstore she often ducked into between delivery shifts, searching for something that might make her son smile. Her fingers grazed the cracked spine of a gently used children's book when her eyes wandered, landing on the magazine rack near the register. A bold headline caught her attention, and her breath hitched. Foresight Group CEO Elliot Hart to expand philanthropic initiatives in 2025. She froze. Her gaze dropped to the accompanying photo, and there he was. Elliot, the man who had waited on Christmas Eve. The man who had smiled at her son like he was the most important guest at the table. The man who had listened without judgment and looked at her as though she mattered. Now, there he was in print, sharp suit, steel gray eyes, and the same faint, gentle smile. Only this time, it came with words like billion-dollar expansion, global outreach, and visionary leader. She read the article once, heart pounding. Then again, slower. Then a third time, just to make sure she was not dreaming. As she stood in the aisle, her hand still clutching the children's book, a voice called out behind her. "You know him?" Lena turned. It was Elise, a part-time bookseller who also worked catering at high-end corporate events. Lena hesitated. "Sort of." Elise chuckled. "He's a big deal, reclusive type, rarely shows up to his own events, but when he does, everyone pays attention. He's actually speaking tonight at the Hyatt, some invite-only charity summit. The words barely settled before Lena heard herself ask, "What time?" 3 hours later, she stood inside the Hyatt's grand lobby, completely unsure of how she had gotten the nerve to come. She wore her plain work dress and a coat that had seen better winters, feeling like an imposter in a room full of velvet gowns and polished cufflinks. She stayed close to a marble column near the back of the ballroom, fingers clenched tightly around her purse. And then she saw him. Elliot took the stage, tall and unhurried, adjusting the microphone with the ease of someone used to being heard. But when he began to speak, his voice was not polished. It was raw, vulnerable. "3 years ago," he said, "I stopped believing in holidays." Lena held her breath. "I lost my wife on Christmas Eve. For a long time, I thought the world owed me silence." The room stilled. But then someone walked into my life. She was late. She was exhausted. She carried a child in her arms. But she showed up, with no promises, no pretense, just truth. His voice broke slightly. "She reminded me that love does not come dressed in perfection. Sometimes it arrives quietly, wrapped in struggle, but it is real." Lena's eyes filled with tears. She pressed her back against the column, aching. When the applause began, she turned and left. That night, she tore a piece from a brown paper grocery bag and wrote a note in quiet pencil strokes. "You gave me something beautiful, a moment I will always carry. But I don't belong in your world, Elliot. Thank you for reminding me it still has beauty. That's more than I ever expected." She slipped it into his mailbox the next morning. No name. No number. Only honesty. And goodbye. Snow had melted into slush by the time New Year approached, but the chill still clung to the city like an old coat that refused to be shaken off. Lena trudged up the stairs of her apartment building, her body heavy with fatigue. She had just returned from her final shift of the week, her arms sore from lifting boxes, her feet aching from hours on her toes. The streets were quiet now, holiday decorations dimmed, but still flickering faintly through windows, holding on to the last traces of December magic. Inside the apartment, the soft hum of the heater greeted her. The lights were off in the living room, save for the gentle glow from a string of paper stars she and Noah had taped to the wall. On the couch, her son lay fast asleep, a blanket tucked up to his chin. His tiny fingers were curled around the fabric, as if he were cradling a dream he did not want to let go of. Lena set down her bag and toed off her shoes, her mind already drifting toward a hot shower and quiet sleep. But as she turned toward the kitchen, she paused. A large cardboard box sat just inside the front door. It had not been there when she left earlier that day. There was no name, no delivery label, no return address, just a small gold bow taped neatly to the top right corner. For a moment, she simply stared at it, hesitant, unsure. Then, with cautious fingers, she opened it. What she found inside made her breath catch. A toolkit, pristine, professional, the kind designers dream of, but rarely afford. There were fine sketch pencils arranged in a neat leather case, precision rulers, fabric swatches in muted but warm tones, and even a miniature model board. Beneath it all, she found a rolled-up poster secured with twine. Her hands trembled slightly as she unrolled it. It was a floor plan, a studio, labeled in soft, flowing cursive at the bottom. Lena's start. The layout was simple but beautiful. A cozy reception corner, adjustable work tables bathed in natural light, a small children's play area tucked near the back. There was even a section labeled Community Wall, where clients could leave stories or offer small services instead of traditional payment. At the bottom, clipped to the blueprint, was a handwritten note. "If the road is hard to walk alone, let someone pave the first steps. Keep building. The world needs your light." There was no signature. But tucked into the margin of the blueprint, drawn delicately in pen, was a small reindeer. Its antlers curled just so, the tail flicked upward in a playful curve. It was the same reindeer Elliot had once doodled on a napkin the night they met, when Noah had asked for a Christmas friend to take home. Footsteps padded softly behind her. Noah stood rubbing his eyes, still half in a dream. He spotted the open box and the blueprint on the floor. "Mama," he whispered, pointing. "That's the reindeer the nice man drew." Lena knelt down beside him, pulling him into her arms. "I think," she said softly, "he never forgot." They sat there in silence, the weight of kindness settling gently around them. She looked again at the blueprint, at the care in every line, at the way someone, Elliot, had remembered not just her words, but the hope behind them. Maybe love did not always announce itself. Sometimes it arrived quietly, wrapped in thoughtfulness, and asked for nothing in return. Lena paused outside the cafe she once knew so well. The same soft glow of yellow lights spilled through the glass. The same jazz melody drifted in. Snow fell in lazy flakes outside. She pulled her coat tighter and stepped in, her heart heavy yet hopeful. Inside, the hum of conversation was muted. The baristas moved quietly between tables. She scanned the room and saw him. Elliot sat at the same corner table near the window, just as she had seen him many nights ago. His coat was draped over the chair, and his posture was calm, composed. But now, there was a quiet resolve in his eyes she recognized, an echo from that first night. She swallowed the lump in her throat and walked toward him, each step echoing in the quiet cafe. People glanced, but did not interrupt. The scent of coffee, faint cinnamon, and old wooden floors welcomed her back. He looked up as she approached. "Elliot," she said softly. Her voice trembled between relief and fear. Why are you here?" He didn't rise. He watched her come closer and gave a half smile, gentle but steady. "I've been here since morning," he replied. His voice was calm, respectful. "I wanted to see you again." Lena's throat tightened. She paused, then let the last few steps bring her to the table. She stood in front of him, closing the distance he had held between them. "Why did you wait?" she asked, eyes brimming. He slid a chair forward. "Because that night, you came, late, tired, but you came, and since then, I have not wanted to meet anyone else." Lena blinked, her heart racing. She looked down at him, blinking back rapid tears. 1,000 thoughts tumbled in her mind. Shock, gratitude, fear. She had thought he might move on. She thought she had no place in his world. But here he was, waiting. He stood then, his coat brushing the floor, and he moved around the table, circling to stand before her. The cafe seemed to shrink around them. All the ambient noise dimmed. Only their breathing remained. Elliot sank to one knee, not in ceremony, not with a ring, just himself, bare and honest. He looked up at Lena, his eyes clear. "You don't have to answer now," he said gently. "I'm not asking you to promise forever right now. I'm asking for one thing." His hand hovered, palm up. "Give me a chance to enter your life and Noah's, and I will show you every day that I will not give up." Tears spilled down Lena's cheeks before she could hold them back. She knelt beside him, putting her hand over his. She did not speak for a long moment. The weight of his words, the storm of emotions she had carried, all pressed on her. Finally she whispered, "You waited for me, even though you didn't know if I would come back." He nodded. "I never stopped hoping." She closed the small gap between them and leaned down. Her lips brushed his cheek in a soft kiss, a blessing, not perfection. "Okay," she said, voice shaky. "I'll try." He rose, and she stood with him, arms entwined. Noah, sitting quietly at a high chair near the window, watched. He smiled and waved, as though he somehow knew. Elliot turned to the cafe crowd, raised a hand in quiet greeting, then led Lena and Noah toward the door. The snow outside had freshened its veil, the city stilled in the hush of snowfall. When they stepped outside, the cold bit at their cheeks, but they felt warmed. Elliot reached for Lena's hand. She squeezed his. Noah tugged at her coat and looked up at the sky. In their triangle of light, under the cafe sign, new beginnings whispered in the air. The past did not vanish. The challenges were not erased. But here, now, they stepped forward. Sometimes love waits. Sometimes love waits patiently. And when it does, it begins again. 1 year later, the small studio on the corner of Maple and Fifth was buzzing with quiet energy. Lena stood near the tall window, watching as a group of women gathered around a work table, sketching layouts and comparing swatches. The sign outside read, "Lena's Start," and below it in smaller letters, "Design with Heart." What began as a hesitant dream had become a warm, thriving space, offering free classes in basic interior design and home repair for single mothers. Women who once doubted themselves now built with confidence, crafted with joy. In the corner, a tall man in a gray hoodie was helping 2 young boys glue pieces of wood together for a miniature bookshelf. He kept his head low, laughing gently when one of the kids smeared paint on his sleeve. He did not wear a suit anymore, not here, and no one addressed him as Mr. Grant. To most, he was just Elliot, the volunteer who fixed the squeaky hinges, made the best cocoa, and never left a project half done. To one small boy, however, he was something else. "Mom," Noah whispered, tugging Lena's sleeve. She leaned down. "Yes, sweetie?" Noah glanced at Elliot, then back at her with wide, unsure eyes. "Can I ask him something?" Lena nodded. Noah crossed the room, his tiny sneakers tapping against the wooden floor. Elliot looked up, setting down a hammer. "Hey, bud," he smiled. "What's up?" Noah shifted his weight. "I know, you're my mom's best friend." Elliot tilted his head, listening. "But," Noah continued, voice small but firm, "do you think, maybe, you could be my dad too?" The room fell silent. Lena's breath caught. Elliot knelt down so they were eye to eye. His voice, when he spoke, was soft with awe. "Only if you'll have me." Noah grinned and launched into his arms. That winter, snow fell early. The wedding was small, just close friends, warm candlelight, and a pine tree strung with handmade ornaments. Lena wore a simple ivory dress, her hair pinned with soft curls. Noah walked her down the short aisle, proud in a little suit with mismatched socks. Elliot waited beneath the twinkle of fairy lights, eyes never leaving her. As they exchanged vows, Lena's hand trembled slightly in his. After the ceremony, they stepped outside. Snowflakes kissed their cheeks. Music drifted faintly from inside the hall. Elliot leaned close and whispered, "I once lost Christmas, but you gave it back to me. Forever." Lena smiled through her tears. Because some stories do not end at the altar. They begin there. If this story touched your heart, reminding you that even in the most unexpected moments, love can quietly find its way back, don't forget to give it a like and share it with someone who needs hope this holiday season. Lena and Elliot's journey shows us that kindness, honesty, and a little faith can light up even the coldest winter nights. Subscribe to Kindness and Love Tales for more beautifully told stories that warm the soul and celebrate the power of connection. Because sometimes, the most ordinary hearts create the most extraordinary love.